Attention YouTube carnivore community. This here's a public service announcement introducing the existence and influence of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. In his apparent how-to book on implementing a dystopian nightmare, George Orwell describes something called doublespeak, where the ruling class will intentionally mislabel things as the polar opposite of what they actually are, as this apparently helps keep the plebs confused and easily manipulated. Enter the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Now, I've had a number of people say to me, but I don't understand how. With a name like the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, how can they be working against U.S. cattlemen? And in this short video, I'd like to explain just a little bit about why that is absolutely the case. Now, you may consider yourself a member of the YouTube carnivore community, and as such, it's most likely that until today you've never even heard of the NCBA. However, there is little doubt that the NCBA is very privy to the YouTube carnivore community, as evidenced by their own words in their published Tactic 2020C, but that's a video for another day. Today, let's just have a look at the NCBA's corporate member page. And when we do, we see that it reads like a who's who of the same corrupt corporations that are pioneering the nutritionally deficient, virus-like, plant-based, soy and pea protein pseudo-meat, the vegan kill cult kibble movement from hell. A little research will reveal that this private lobbying firm is not only controlled by the vegan kill cult itself, but its actual cattleman membership only represents less than 4% of cattlemen here in the United States. Despite being completely void of any considerable small U.S. beef producer influence at all, the NCBA annually receives outright the proceeds raised from a special tax levied against small U.S. beef producers like myself called the Beef Checkoff. No, I said the Beef Checkoff. Every year, this mandatory small U.S. beef producer funded slush fund is handed over to the NCBA, where they use it to promote cheap, industrially raised, corn subsidy-fed beef from all over the world to Americans. This is what the NCBA was recently quoted saying during their recent attack on and successful assassination of country of origin labeling on beef sold in the United States.
So this looks like an organized, planned insurrection. And I can see some of the players straight out in the broad daylight, in my opinion. And there's lots more. But I want to go on to the second topic now, which is meatpacking plants. This is pandemic related. This is a separate group. Well, it's the same group, but they're just running a different gray zone exploit. And this is the food supply. Okay, but you'll see as we go along that it intersects with a whole bunch of other areas. And they all benefit. Memphis meats. This is fake meat. This is what they're calling cell-based meat, where they take a stem cell from a cow and they put it in a gloppy solution and it multiplies, and eventually they have enough to form it into a hamburger shape. It's gross. It's disgusting. It's not meat, but they want to be able to call it meat without telling us that they grew it in a lab. Anyway, I've talked enough about that. Let's not get stuck there. Uma Valetti and Nicholas Genovese founded Memphis Meats in 2015. The company's goal is to feed 10 billion people by 2050 and countless more beyond that. Blah, blah, blah. This is part of UN Agenda 21, 2030, 2050. They want us never to eat animals. I do not agree with factory farming, but if you were the head of a company of factory farms, like the guy from Tyson or the guy from Cargill, what would you do about this cell-based meat thing? In saner days, I would probably just laugh it off because that's disgusting and people won't want it. And who cares if some fringe tiny number of people want it, right? That's not what they did. For some reason, what they did instead was they invested in it. Tyson and Cargill invested in cell-based meat, along with who? Bill Gates and Richard Branson and SoftBank and other people too. But there's some of your usual suspects right there. And what happens when the COVID hits? Well, all of a sudden, wouldn't you know, there's strange high number of outbreaks of positive tests for it at meatpacking plants. As they rushed to maintain U.S. meat supply, big processors saw plants become COVID-19 hotspots, worker illnesses spike. Over 30 plants run by these companies? Really? What are the chances? Have we heard of outbreaks at the grocery stores at all? Any other companies? No, just the meat packing plants. What are the chances of this? Well, I say there's a really good chance because meat packing plants combine a lot of the globalist agendas. This article in the Globe and Mail shows you one of them. Meat packing plants operate out of the spotlight, primarily staffed by people born and raised abroad. Many of those who work at the High River plant are temporary foreign workers and immigrants tied to Calgary's Filipino community. This reminds me, once again, of Project Aerodynamic, which I've talked about before, where they, the bad actors, the deep state, the globalists, they figured out a long time ago that if you put a group of people who are basically, they are vulnerable because they don't speak the language, they don't fit into the culture, they don't have permanent lives in the country they're working in. They can be used for anything. Voting blocks, they don't even understand the language. You can lie to them all day and night about their rights because they can't figure out how to defend themselves. But they've weaponized those communities now. A whole bunch of people have. And so you can see how they might just tell them, hey, we're closing the plant. And they pick one representative guy who gets a big bonus for going out and talking to the news and saying, oh, they didn't give us PPE, so we have to close down the plant. I mean, we don't know what's really going on, but we do know Tyson and Cargill were getting ready for a major disruption to their line of work, weren't they? They're investing in fake meat. They were taking advantage of illegal and legal migrants and temporary foreign workers. This basically is a government handout, by the way, to their companies. And it undercuts the communities that they live in. It throws the people who live there out of work. If a large migrant community moves in, this spikes real estate and rental prices. You see how that single thing works in a lot of gray zone areas? And there's another one it works in too, which is human rights and lawfare. Lawfare is definitely a gray zone exploit. Check this out. All of these petitions sprung up calling for closures at the Tyson plant, at the JBS plant, at the Cargill plant. And P.S. JBS and Cargill in areas of pork, that's the same company now. So really we're just talking really about a very small group of people owning all these meatpacking plants that suddenly had outbreaks of COVID, and that activists actually started petitions. Close this plant, close that plant, close all the plants. It disrupts the supply chain. Look at all the things that it does. I've already talked about some of them. But really what this is a threat to our society. It's a threat to all the people. It can cause meat shortages. It impacts restaurateurs so they lose their business. It impacts small farmers and medium-sized farmers. We're seeing them have to euthanize their livestock because they can't get it to the meat packing plants. That's what they're telling us, because the meat packing plants are closed. It undermines a whole lot. And it frightens me. Probably one of the most of all the things that's happening right now is the idea of food shortages, because when you learn history, you learn that that is one of the go-to control mechanisms. They do it almost every time if they get far enough ahead in this game. And to me right now, they're very far ahead in this game. Look at what's happening across the U.S. and how can it be stopped? P.S. What has happened to this Memphis Meats stock price? Its seed round funding was $5 million in 2016, and now it's at $186. So I guess the people who invest large amounts of money in these things, who are all the same people we've been talking about, they know what they're doing. They know that they're going to find ways to force people to eat this lab-grown garbage, Franken
Hell
spew.
no.
I'm not going
Ugh.
to call it meat. But do be aware that as far as I know, I'm trying to go from memory here, the guy from Tyson Foods, I believe it's him, he is helping the fake meat people with their crusade to be allowed to label their fake meat as real meat, I believe. So which way do you think this thing is going? All right, there is a little bit of a happy ending to this story. Remember I said that Bill Gates invested in this, Memphis Meats, and one of the owners was this guy, Nicholas Genovese. Oh, surprise! Guess what happened in February? Hedge fund manager sentenced to 140 months in prison for defrauding investors of millions of dollars. Who is it? It's Nicholas Genovese. The U.S. Attorney Jeffrey Berman said Nicholas Genovese is a recidivist, fraudster, and con artist who tricked more than 10 victims into investing more than $11.2 million into his hedge fund called Willow Creek based on false claims about his background and credentials. I think that's great because that's one guy gone from Memphis Meats, and it's very close connection to Bill Gates. I wonder if Nicholas Genovese's Memphis Meats will similarly be shut down for some kind of bogus fraud. The thing is, that kind of bogus fraud will be dangerous to our health. I do wonder what they are putting in this stuff. What culture are they growing those stem cells in? And which part of this will we find out was GMO? It's a very dark, obscured industry. These tech foods, and that's what they are. Most of these guys have factories in Silicon Valley. They are calling themselves big tech. So yummy, eat up kids, that cell-based meat, delicious. And Bill Gates will make a lot of money. He's also invested in Beyond Meat, which I do believe is a vegetarian burger, not a fake lab-grown meat thing, but just shows you what direction these guys want to go. All right, I just have one more thing to show you before we go. Just a quick follow-up. Victor Zhao, remember him on the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board?